Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, and we're sitting down to talk about Xbox and some of their mighty surprising moves in this last week. Now, before all this, it was a pretty rough week for Xbox and Bethesda together. We absolutely gave them the smoke, but let's see if we can make this a better week, Xbox, and I think we're off to a good start. What we're looking at today are three individual batches of pretty good news coming together where I feel like quietly Xbox is making some notable moves on the Halo front, on InXile's front with an IP I know we all care about, I believe. That's just my speculation. There's a lot to get into today. I'm really excited about all of it. And even Bethesda Game Studios with a pretty noteworthy hire, and one that I think as someone who covers mods is really, really cool. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here, you're into Xbox and Bethesda news and information, consider subscribing. Let's start off with InXile. For those who don't know InXile, they're the developers of The Bard's Tale, as well as most recently, Wasteland 3. Now, if you haven't played Wasteland 3, it's one of the best role-playing games of all time, no exaggeration. The amount of choice there is downright awe-inspiring. The amount of ways you can replay the game, both in gameplay and narratively, is staggering. So anything they touch, I'm just like, yo, you got my attention as a role-playing game fan. The report has been since 2021 that InXile is working on what's called Project Cobalt. You can see an image of potential concept art here on screen now. My good friend Jez Corden reported about this one, saying that it was going to be a steampunk first-person shooter RPG on Unreal Engine 5. And that originally at the time of its report, it was slated for 2023. Now that's all incredibly exciting stuff, but that sounds mighty different from what we're going to be talking about today, which is an established IP. What Project Cobalt is seems to be a brand new IP. So that brings us to this rumor today, where we learned that InXile is working on a known IP at least since the year of 2021, where if you go to George William IV's LinkedIn page, you'll see that he was contracted as a game designer over at InXile, where he, quote, provided research and setting development for an upcoming video game in an established IP with the project still under NDA, end quote. Now, since then, I went and just researched. He has removed the mentioning of this being an established IP following numerous sites reporting on it. So it looks like it was a little bit of a whoopsies. Now, going back to Project Cobalt, Jez Corden writes in his article on Windows Central that what we do know about it is that it is a steampunk style inspired by the Industrial Revolution inspired tech, with expectations of steam engines, zeppelins, retro future robots, dark Victorian streets, and more. Sounds very different from anything else they could be working on. So an established IP from InXile, who made the series Wasteland, that gave birth to the series we love and talk about a lot today, Fallout, and we have Brian Fargo, one of the fathers of Fallout, at InXile. I know it's a bit of like a smidge, we're just putting a drop of copium in here, but man, do the stars kind of align for a moment here if you truly want to believe. What's really exciting about this project, in all objectivity, is we know nothing about it other than it purely existing. But this is also a highlight of what Xbox Game Studios has been doing. For all the wrong we've covered, one thing that they've got right is the experimentations of their bigger talents. So you have someone like Obsidian, who has the identity of big budget RPGs. And so we're expecting that with Avowed. We're expecting that with maybe a New Vegas 2, hopefully. We're expecting that type of energy with the Outer Worlds 2. However, you're seeing from them Grounded. You're seeing from them Pentiment. And I think those projects are of equal importance because it keeps everyone creatively rejuvenated, working on new things, not constantly in the trenches working on the same things constantly, which would be role-playing games. They're breaking that mold and redefining who their studio is. And we continue to see that with Hi-Fi Rush coming out of Tango Gameworks, the team known for survival horror games like The Evil Within, delivered one of still the best video games this year in a rhythmic beat-em-up style game. This has been the real defining quality in the last 6 months for Xbox Game Studios, in my eyes, the experimentation. So while I want to sit here and be like, yo, it's got to be Fallout, and I do think there is enough there to suggest it's possible, I would expect whatever this to be to be much smaller than Project Cobalt and something more of a passion project. And if it is that, it could break the mold of what we expect from InXile. And to me, as a fan of Xbox, I think that's great. What I hope Xbox is planning to do, though, with all of these new series is, making a full franchise out of them, not just letting them be random one-offs, but developing them and making them part of the Xbox culture. Because with all of the experiments, it brings me back to the OG Xbox days where you'd get things like Voodoo Vince and Blinks the Time Sweeper, just these really weird, obscure Xbox exclusive games that felt like passion projects. I think Blinks the Time Sweeper was presented as a 4D platformer. Like, that type of stuff to me is so cool and is really what made me an Xbox fan to this day, beyond the 360 being absolutely goated. But point being is, I feel like we're knocking on the door of that type of Xbox energy if we keep this up. So I hope they choose to try to support these franchises and not just let them be whatever one-offs. But anyway, InXile, new game, established IP, let it be Fallout, man. Because I feel like if you were to put a gun to my head and say, Matty, what comes first? Remasters or some type of spin-off Fallout game? Honestly, I know the workload for something like a remaster sounds smaller, but I would feel like a spin-off style game from InXile that doesn't really collide with Bethesda's vision for what Fallout is in the future would seem much more plausible and easier to get across the finish line. Because I feel like Bethesda has this view of like Fallout, based off what we determined it's going to be in 2008 with Fallout 3, must always be this first/third person hybrid open world shooter. So if InXile says, hey, we want to make a Fallout style game like Wasteland 3, isometric RPG, lots of choice focus here, still great gameplay, more tactics oriented like Fallout Tactics. What do you think of that? I feel like that's an easier green light than outsourcing the remaster, because it doesn't directly influence where the Fallout IP is going to go. Think of it like you've got Gears of War, where you know what Gears of War is, and then you get Gears Tactics, which is very clearly something else. I feel like that could be the easier green light, and man, oh man alive, would I be excited if InXile was working on a Fallout game. Honestly, to an extent equal to if I heard Bethesda Game Studios was making one right now. Why is that? Again, it goes back to Wasteland 3. If you haven't played it, it's a co-op game, by the way. You can do it that way, but fantastic RPG, choice rich, and it's got that Fallout energy because Wasteland gave birth to Fallout. So if you like Fallout, yeah, it's not going to have the open world stuff, but the customization, gameplay, tactics, choices, and humor, it's absolutely ridiculous. If you are a Fallout fan, I think you will love Wasteland 3. Give it a look and you will become a believer and suddenly start calling for that type of game for the Fallout franchise. Believe you me. All right, let's move on to the next one here. We're shifting our attention to Halo and 343. We've talked much about 343 in the last 12 months than I really ever expected following the launch of the game. I thought it'd just be, watching them have upkeep on the franchise with Infinite, and obviously we know it didn't really go that way. And since then, we've seen numerous long-term employees or people of importance leave 343. Now, in the terms of the, I'll call it old guard at 343, we've seen Kiki Wolfkill leave, we've seen Bonnie Ross leave, and now we have learned through Steve Totillo that Frank O'Connor, who is the franchise director for Halo, long-term, by the way, has left. He writes on Twitter, Microsoft confirms the departure of longtime Halo franchise director Frank O'Connor, who worked on Master Chief's games for 2 decades. We thank Frank for his numerous contributions to the Halo franchise and wish him well going forward. Meanwhile, Joe Staten, who has recently left Xbox and was responsible to many people for steering and landing the plane, as they always say, with Halo Infinite, writes on his Twitter account, today I'm thrilled to announce I've joined Netflix Games as creative director for a brand new AAA multi-platform game and original IP. Let's go. Hey, salute to Joe. I imagine if it's Netflix, he got a pretty hefty bag, because we don't really know what Netflix's future is in games, and to many consumers it sounds uncertain, but knowing someone like him is there is definitely reaffirming. So I'm excited to see what they bring to the table. But a lot of big names and long-term names, especially attached to Halo, leaving. For all we've said about Microsoft needs to get involved, what's going on with Bethesda? I think we are seeing that with Halo, and we should call attention to that and give it the same energy. We are seeing, again, Kiki Wolfkill out. We see Bonnie Ross out. We're seeing Frank out. And many fans believe they weren't doing the best of job there with the Halo franchise. And I think the state of Infinite speaks for itself, and the state of Master Chief Collection being a little bit higher than Infinite speaks for itself. So when I look at that type of stuff, you know what I see is that there was a recognized issue here that we need to change the vision for Halo. We need to start swapping out the people who've been there for a while, whether they were pushed out or asked to go or said, hey, you got like an 8-month window and then you got to find some place to be, whatever it may have been. We're seeing so many people leave at the same time that it's just not a sheer coincidence. Of course, 343 in general was nailed by layoffs, which was sad to see. We really weren't rooting for that, but more so this type of energy, a changing of the old guard to reinvigorate the Halo franchise. For many though, and I'm still there with this energy, I don't really trust 343. I don't know what to say. To me, if you're going to remove the old guard, which is good, and start instilling 343 with new ideas, new personalities, new visionaries, you may as well have brought the IP somewhere else as far as I'm concerned, because we're pretty much trying to do that within the Halo house. And instead of letting them go and do something else and escape the Halo pressure, we're kind of throwing them back into it just with a different set of people. I'll keep an open mind to it. You know, I think that Season 3 has gone really well for Halo Infinite, so that's great to see, but I think the damage has been permanently done, and it would definitely catch more people's attention and excitement if, this is a hypothetical, if id were to say, come out and be like, we're making the next Halo game. I think that would turn a ton of heads. We'll see in due time. Let's not count them out too much, because it looks like that's what Xbox is going with in trusting 343 moving forward. And so no sense in arguing what's already set in stone. We'll just see how it goes. And from there, they kind of need to nail it. If they don't nail it, I don't know. Are they just going to end up going to what we all suggested would happen in the first place? Time will tell. But now we move on to our last bit of news involving Bethesda Game Studios. This is a smaller one, but I still find it to be a pretty exciting one as someone who covers modding. So it has been discovered, thanks to Idle Sloth over on Twitter, that Veronica Harbison, who was the quest designer at Bethesda Game Studios for almost 2 years, is now taking their talents over to InXile Entertainment as, again, a quest designer. Now, what's cool is you'll see at the bottom of the work experience there is lead narrative designer for Sim Settlements, which was a pretty popular mod for Fallout. And I just thought that was really cool. Like, that's, to me, the Fallout dream, right? To go from Bethesda Game Studios, who inspired so many of us, to InXile, who has that spirit of the old style Fallout game. I mean, so cool. Does this mean, when I was speculating earlier, like, oh, they worked on Fallout mods and they're going over to InXile, are they working on Fallout? Little too galaxy brain even for me, but just something cool to see that we're getting that type of good talent there over at InXile. It's also interesting that this is a job swap within the Xbox family. So to say, some have wondered, is it just that easy? It could be a sign of either way, depending on the narrative people want to run with. I've seen people say it's a sign that Xbox leadership is great. Look, they're swapping studios. And it's also been a sign that Xbox leadership is so uninvolved that you don't even notice, so you can just go wherever and this is a happy coincidence. We don't know. There's no sense in really speculating heavily on it. The main takeaway to me is when you see a quest designer who was working full-time at Bethesda Game Studios for almost 2 years, leaving around the time that we got the release date for Starfield, to me indicates that that game is officially in that polished stage and that you can trust pretty heavily they're going to rock with that November 6th release date, which I think most of us felt confident in. But with the 30 FPS conversation and some concerns floating around about that, some are worrying about another delay. It's a lot of uncertainty in the air, unfortunately, given recent news. But I think, personally, you can kind of start locking it in as we get closer to that developer direct. Ladies and gentlemen, that's everything I got for you today. So I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on all these quiet moves happening behind the scenes for Xbox. Let me know what you're thinking, especially on that InXile game. I'm really curious what the fan speculation shall be. So I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. Be sure to fire away. Other than that, take great care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all of the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.